All right, welcome to Black Men Speak. I'm your co-host, J.R. Stewart.
And good evening, everyone. I'm your co-host, Tommy Duncan. Welcome to Black Men Speak.
Welcome to Black Men Speak. And so let's take care of a little administrative business first. If you're new to the show, please hit the like button so you'll be notified, when new shows come out, and the notification bell. And please subscribe to our channel, and then spread the word. We want to give a big thanks to Liquid for providing our theme music. And if you come back, when you come back next week, there are going to be some changes. We're changing the format up a little bit. We're going to change our intro up some. We're going to expand out the ways that you can watch the show. So for those who don't watch it live, you can join our opt-in list, and we'll send you a notification when our new show is uploaded. And actually, you can go back and click on the link and watch it from your cell phone. So we set up another video server to stream our shows. So we just want to make sure that we give people every opportunity to get our message. Because why do we do this, Tom? Because this is the best talk show on the internet dealing with black issues. I don't care what anyone says. Tonight, Tom, we're going to talk about the black church. We had one of our minister friends come on and talk about some of the difficulties with growing the black church today, and so we're going to kind of expand on that and talk a little bit about the fact that attendance is down, in fact, way down in the black churches on average across the nation. And I have a couple of theories that I want to share that I think is the cause of that. So let's just jump in, Tom, like we do, and get started.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of interesting articles, folks. I mean, obviously, over the last year, there's, literally the world has flipped upside down, and it has really impacted, pretty much every aspect of our daily lives, in terms of family, in terms of work, obviously, in terms of worship. And, but it's interesting that you bring up this topic in terms of the state of the black church. And first, we'll say before neither of us are ordained ministers. So,
no, that's true. Neither one of us.
Yeah, there we go. So we want to make sure that we put that caveat out there. But we are providing the perspective of two black men who obviously, I can't speak for you, Jimmy, who grew up in the church, have been around different churches. Jimmy, I grew up very young in the Baptist church, and then when I got into my mid-teens, in the Catholic church, and have attended different types of services. But to your point, there has been an interesting trend in the church attendance, and it kind of wavers a little bit depending on which demographic you're looking at in terms of age. I've been looking at some articles on this, and it's very interesting trends that I think folks are going to have to take note of, and especially those who are continuing to drive the agenda of the church in general and the black church in particular, which is what we're focusing on.
Right. So growing up, I mean, we were everything imaginable. I think we were everything except the Nation of Islam. My mother was heavily into the church, and when she would get disillusioned with one and fall out with one, she would just jump to another. So yeah, we were Seventh-day Adventists, we were Baptists, we were CME, AME. If there was a black church out there or belief, we were into that at some point. So yeah, we were heavily into the church, which is surprising because church was a black thing, Tom. That was our thing. The black church was our thing, and to see the decline of the black church. And I say decline, I don't mean necessarily of the number of churches or the influence. We're really talking about attendance is
and
down.
You bring up a very good point. I mean, I don't think that it's any secret. Any place where you go to where there are at least 2 or 3 black folks, you're going to see a black church someplace. And in larger metropolitan areas across the country, you can throw a rock.
You hit a black church, yes.
In a black church, in particular in a black community, so to speak. And so what we want to make sure that we put the context here. We're not saying that the black church is going away. We're not saying that the black church doesn't have a purpose and a mission. Surely it does, and there's a specific reason why, for one of the things that I forgot who said this a long time ago, that I heard that, one of the most segregated places, in the country, of course, is the church.
Black church, that's correct. Let me share one of the articles here, Tom. Let me see. There were a couple of articles I wanted to share. Let me pull one up for you and the crowd.
And by the way, folks, while he's pulling that up, as we go through the show, again, make sure that you smash that like button, subscribe if you have not subscribed already. And if you do want to call in, you can also call in at 972-497-2280. If you have any contributions that you would like to make to our conversation, or if you would like to ask any questions. So we will continue to move on. All right, tell us about this article.
So this article is basically pointing out that for one of the first times in history that you have more young black people skipping out on church than white people. Like I said, church used to be our thing, and now we're losing ground there because more and more of our people, especially young people, are skipping church. Not heavily involved. And of course, growing up, Tom, it wasn't just church on Sunday. You had to go to the deacon meetings and you had to go to Bible study. It seemed like we were in church at least 3 times a week, if not 4 times, and that was outside of Sunday.
Right.
And don't be in the choir on the deacon board or the usher board or something. Then that's just another meeting during the week that you had to attend.
Right, and Jerry, let's be very clear. Don't be in a rural area or in a small country town, because you were in the church sometimes almost every day.
Yes. Steve Harvey had that skit where he talked about growing up in a church and how his mother would drag him to church. And he said it was almost every day. So it was like, at some point, you're like, you need to take a break from church. But evidently, a lot of young people are not or falling away from church. Not just the young people, some older people in our age group also.
Yeah. True.
We may go to church on Sunday, but we don't go to church like our parents and grandparents did, where they were in church 3-4 times a week. So there's just already been a drop off.
It's funny that you bring that point up, because I do remember being very young. I do remember going to my grandmother's church. I do remember going to my mother's church and sitting in those long 3-hour services, 3.5-hour services on Sunday, and then having to go to evening church sometimes.
Yes.
You got Bible study on Wednesday. If they threw you in the children's choir, you're going there at least once or twice a week.
Got to go practice, yes.
You got to go when mama and daddy go when if they're the usher, or what some people call the ursher. And so, really, let's be very clear. The black church, for the black community, really the church was the centerpiece of black life when you speak to probably everything up through our parents' generation. The black church was the center of life.
Right. And it was, Tom, and I think that's part of the reason for the decline, that and messaging. The church needs to get out of politics, get out of trying to be woke, stop trying to be politically correct, get back to the teaching, and get back to caring about people. Stop focusing so much on the collection plate. Every sermon segues to the same point, is a collection plate. I understand they have to pay bills and stay in business, but
Yes, sir.
but also, the church, the black church, used to be the place you went to when your child got arrested and you couldn't afford a lawyer, or you wanted to get things done. People met at the church to talk about their problems and come together to deal with them. You don't do that. The church is not the center point of black society anymore. And
Well,
that.
Jimmy, you're right.
Oh, go ahead.
You're right, Jimmy, but society has changed so dramatically within the last generation, and there are a couple of things that I want to attribute that to. One of the things that we have to consider, and I can't speak for you. I think both of us are probably Gen Xers. When we grew up, we had home, we had school, and we had the church. And most of us grew up with a television in the house. There was one television usually. Right. I can't speak for everybody. I think when I was maybe a teenager, I had a TV in my house. But when I was growing up and I was young, there was one TV and that was it. Exactly. Number two, we did not have PCs growing up. Right. And so that portal into what we now know as the largest library in the world did not exist when we came up. So we didn't have other sources of information other than our parents, who were giving us guidelines and telling us what we were going to do and what we were not going to do, and what do we better get when we had to get back home from running up and down the street. We better be back in before that street light turned off.
The street lights, Tom. That was exactly. The boy. You better be inside when them lights came. When they start flickering, you hear the buzz. Yeah, you know to start running home at that point.
Number two, after the family, was school, and depending on where you were, I grew up, kind of in that generation where we were starting to integrate schools. So, I went to a mixed school, which means it was not predominantly black. Probably in my neighborhood in grammar school and in junior high, it was somewhat mixed to predominantly black. When I went to high school, it was completely mixed. I went to a magnet school. So you had family, you had the school, what was given to you by your teachers, and you had the church. Those were our sources of information. Now, when you consider a generation, two generations really, the millennials and Gen Z, quite frankly, a lot of that has been replaced by what started out as looking on your computer and really being in front of a screen more so than anything else, and now the phone. And so you don't have as many kids growing up who their only source of information or insight or wisdom is coming from their parents or the school or church. But you have this thing here in this kind of Bible, so to speak. And it's been positive in some ways, but it has been destructive in some ways, as you've seen as well.
Well, Tom, I'm going to pull up another article here. And this one deals with a young pastor. Can't remember what church it was. Let me see. Let me find it. Oh, here we go. The pastor under 40. Some of it, Tom, I think is messaging. And I think there are a lot of young people who want to have their Selma moment. They want to be involved. They want to be part of something. They want to feel like they've been part of something, of a movement. And they almost jump to anything these days. And it's really kind of sad because a lot of times they are they're attracted and navigating towards the wrong type of movements. But when they look at the older generations, at our grandparents and great-grandparents and the civil rights movement, that was something that resonated with people. It was centered around God. The messages was centered around God and love and nonviolence. Spoken as at least a part that Dr. King led. And when young people are now looking to get involved in something, want to have their moment, want to change the world, where's the black church to give them something to go out there and fight for, to get involved in? So the black church is not leading anymore. And this is why they're not attracting younger people. So here is an article about a church. I think this pastor is 27, if I remember the article correctly. And basically he's just having troubles, Tom. Let me see, let me drill down to the article a little bit. So, a 1,000-member church is not bad. And I think, he's, they say he's 26. He's the associate pastor, but, he's noticed that a lot of young black people are just not coming to church. And I'm pretty sure, for them to be cited in this article that that the church is probably larger than 1,000 members at one point, so they probably shrunk down to 1,000. Um, and it talks about some of the things on how the messaging is changing within the church as far as our views towards the alphabet community and some other issues. But these are probably some things that probably the church should do its best to stay away from, in my opinion, um, and find some things that you can challenge young people to go out there and save the world, feed the hungry, fix up somebody's house, help the elderly, and give them some real things that they can do and challenge them to do it. And you may find them coming back to the church looking for some guidance on what to do with their lives.
Right, Jimmy. I think those bring up some very good points, and I would agree with you that whether it's a church, whether it's a business, completely secular, at the end of the day, your product or your service has to resonate with a community if you're going to continue to grow your, in this case, congregation. Any business grow its clientele.
Right.
Ultimately, young people of the last two generations, and when I say the last two generations, I'm talking about millennials, and I'm talking about Gen Zers, who are kind of coming on or I would say on the come up right now. They have a completely different psychology than silence. They have a different psychology than the boomers. They have a different psychology than Gen X. Those populations, again, they have a few different sources of information.
Right.
They pretty much they believed in the government. They believed in big business taking care of them, and they worked for one company for the majority of their life, and then they retired with a good pension or retirement. Their parents basically were the law, and the church, was the only thing that most likely anything else maybe was above their parents. And that's because most of what they were learning was from the parents, and most of what their parents were learning from came from the church.
Right.
We look at the last 20 to 30 years, Jimmy, we've got some issues here. I think you and I, we've talked about this before. Black men have left the church in droves.
And the black family, Tom. They left their families and the church.
Right. Well, I mean, the black men left the church, and primarily because, quite frankly, the message wasn't getting to black men. They were not reaching a lot of, and I'm talking the black church in particular.
Right.
They lost a lot of men because of the messaging. And I would agree with you 100% on that. And, quite frankly, I think that, along with some other social and political issues, really has left the church bereft of a direction, because we do know that women have always been the backbone of our families. They've always been the backbone of practically every one of our organizations. Right. That have been advocating what our black community needs to grow and advance, but they've also been the backbone of the church. You may have had a male pastor there, but it was really the women who were making sure that the pastor's vision was getting done. We still have we have a few black female pastors or leaders of church, but again, it's overwhelmingly black male, and in the white church is overwhelmingly white male. Trying not to steer off topic too much, there are a couple of things we have to consider here. One is that the traditional message that the black church and the black preachers have been putting out there doesn't connect and doesn't resonate.
No, it does not.
I was looking at a Pew Research a little bit earlier today. I want to say the silent and the boomers, they're probably 60, 70%, church going. The Gen Z and the millennials, they're right around 50%. When you look at the demographics of where they're going to church, that is the black church versus predominantly white church or mixed churches, so to speak, that population has been growing. But for what it's worth, Jimmy, we've been seeing not only a decline in attendance at black churches, but at white churches as well.
White churches too. Well, white churches have been on a decline, though. That's the thing. They've been on decline for a while, but now we're starting to see and actually outpacing their decline for the first time.
Right. So, for what it's worth, when we look at the movements, the black churches traditionally always been at the center of all of our social and political movements. And that's primarily because a lot of our leaders came from the church. Of course, whether you're talking about Malcolm, whether you're talking about Martin, even if you want to go back a couple of 100 years and talk about Nat Turner or Denmark Vesey, they were, out of the church. But of course, you always had a Marcus Garvey who had a secular organization. You had Frederick Douglass, who obviously learned through the church, but he didn't have as much of a religious bent at that point in time in terms of what he was advocating for the Black community. Today, when you look at the movements, there are very few churches that are addressing a lot of the issues that young people are more focused on and are more passionate about, and as a result, they're losing a lot of them.
That's right. And so, Tom, if the messaging were to go back to advocating for strong men in the household to be responsible, to take care of their families, for families to raise their children the proper way, and for the churches to get more involved in the human existence. So when you think someone has been wrong, that there's a wrong to be righted, like let's say the death of George Floyd, the church should have been out there. Maybe if the church took the lead on some of these issues, these things wouldn't be so violent, because they can let people know that, hey, we need to let our voices be heard, but not through violence and destruction. By showing people that, one, we're just not going to take it and we're going to stand up for our rights, but we're going to do this in a peaceful way. We can win more hearts and souls by doing it the right way versus doing it the violent way. And so, so this is where I challenge the church, Tom. I've been saying this for a while, that the messaging in the church has been off and has been wrong. Not only did that message abandon and not challenge Black men to stay with their wives, to raise their children, to be responsible, and that was a mistake, especially when the pressure was put on Black men to leave the household during the 60s. The message from the church should have been, every Sunday you should have been talking about one thing: Black men, stay your ass at home. Don't leave and abandon your families thinking that the government can do a better job in taking care of them than you can. So we have to stand up at a time when things are starting to go south for us. The church needs to take the lead on pushing the message to the point of monotony, till it all sinks in and we all get in sync on what is important. And family and keeping our families together is important. And we see the detriment of kids being raised without a father in the home. I mean, it leads to every social problem you can think of. If you go out there and search on white papers and research papers on absentee fatherhood, they damn near attribute everything in America, all the social ills, to absentee fatherhood. I thought for certain I would find one crazy liberal school that would say that absentee fatherhood and single motherhood was okay. Tom, not even the most liberal schools make that argument. So, this has affected Black people. Now it's starting to affect other groups in America also. So this is a Black problem is now becoming a nation problem, but we need to get off that path, Tom, before it gains critical mass. We've seen what it's been like, so we need to get back to our roots of keeping our families together.
Jimmy, that's very hopeful speaking in terms of trying to reel it back in before the wheels fall off. But Jimmy, if we look at the statistics, which we've talked about ad nauseum over many of our shows, the wheels have already fallen off.
They have.
And quite frankly, majority, is it 75? At least 75, close to 80%.
75% now
exactly. Of our households are single female-headed households. We see what it's doing to our young men. That is not to say that Black women cannot raise children and sons in particular to be responsible and destructive. But let's just say, if we look at the obvious, if you just open your eyes, it has not worked very well for us. And when you go to a gas station, you look at boys sitting in the car, twiddling his thumbs while girls are paying for the gas, pumping the gas. You go to
Tom, pumping the gas with a sorry POS sit in the seat of the car.
Right, exactly. Right. You go to the church, you see girls leading boys into the church.
Yes.
You see boys who are it, when you see boys who literally want to be girls, and for what it's worth, they're taking the lead from who? Their mothers.
Mothers, right.
And a mother is hardwired to love their sons, coddle their sons, nurture their sons. But unfortunately, as you mentioned earlier, because of the absence of the father, there's no one to draw a line in the ground and say, look, let him get up by himself. Let him lay in the bed that he made for himself. And mothers, in loving their sons, have, for lack of a better term, hurt an entire generation of young boys who don't know what it means to be young men, with some exceptions. I see it every day.
Yep.
Obviously, there are a lot of very strong, determined, intelligent young Black men out there. But when I look around every day, going out to the mall, which I don't do that often anymore, going to restaurants, when I see the state of affairs with young Black men, and even with young Black women now, Jimmy, it's getting real tricky with young Black women, because you have a lot of young Black women who are modeling themselves after men, and you got young Black boys who are modeling themselves after women. So
Tom, that is so true. And so many of these young men, men, boys, basically what they are, they take on these emotional traits and behaviors. They're very emotional. They're not very logical. You're willing to fight someone for stepping on your tennis shoe, which is the most illogical, silly thing there is. You're risking, imprisonment over silly stuff. You're jeopardizing yourself. You have no leadership characteristics, nor do you want to be responsible. You want someone to be responsible for you rather than you taking the ownership of being responsible for a family. I mean, it scares the hell out of them. But the women traditionally have been the fearful ones, which is why you would need a strong man to help overcome insecurities that women naturally have, because they're security conscious. But when you have an insecure woman and an insecure man, that doesn't make for a very good combination, Tom. And you're right. It seems like the roles are reversing. So many women now want to protect and take care of men, and the men standing behind them, letting her, as the woman is the shield, letting her go out and fight the battle. Let her go out and earn and be the wage earner. Let her pay the bills, take care of things, while he sit at home willing to do God knows what, because I can't even imagine what a real man would do in a situation like that, allowing a woman to go out and take care of him. You can't have any pride in yourself, Tom. You can't have a sense of accomplishment being that type of man. In fact, it would be challenging for me to even call you a man in that situation. You're just a grown boy, for the most part, who's been raised by a woman and don't know any better. And this is the downfall of having so many of our young boys growing up in households with women and no strong men. Now, some of them have a man in their life, and he's just as weak as the mother. So that's not a good situation either, to have a weak man in the household.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Keep it simple when you say as weak as the mother.
Well, I mean, there are some children growing up in a two-parent household, but the father's weak. He has no backbone. He doesn't stand for anything. So once again, it's still the wife or the mother who's calling the shots, who's running things. And that's not to say that she can't do it. All I'm saying is that when it comes to young boys, they need to learn how to be strong men. They need to learn how to have character. They need to learn to be responsible. Your father made you do certain things when we were growing up, Tom, to learn a sense of responsibility. There were certain things you wouldn't let the daughters do or your sisters do, for that sense of division in labor and responsibility. There are certain things that the daughter was expected that you wasn't. And sometimes more was placed on the young boys. When I was growing up, it wasn't like my parents or my grandmother didn't force me into a kitchen and learn to cook. So it wasn't just that was just relegated to the young girls. Sometimes the boys had to do some of the things that you would naturally attribute to the area of responsibility for young girls growing up. So, but these things, learn to sew, learn to do hair, all things that benefit you in the long run when you have a family and you need to help your spouse out. But like I said, these things are not passed on anymore. Mothers and daughters used to, or women used to sit in the kitchen and talk with the young girls in there listening, not necessarily participating in the conversation because they didn't have anything to really say because they didn't have any life behind them, but they can listen and learn from the older women talk about things. That doesn't happen anymore. They don't get together and do hair anymore and have those conversations. So there's no knowledge being transferred from older women down to younger women. Younger women are getting their information from their peers and from the internet and from the desperate wives and yes,
Megan the Horse and all these other people.
All these influencers out there who and that's not a good source. And our young boys is even worse. They're trying to learn how to be men from watching thug videos, rap videos, and gangster rappers, and that's just not a reality, Tom. So yeah, our community is in really bad shape, and I would really hope that the black church collectively would understand what is going on, change your message up, give our young people a reason to come back, and give them a chance to learn a godly message. And one, stop focusing so much on the collection plate, start focusing a little bit more on people.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, you have to understand that, churches and pastors have a very difficult job. What we do want to make sure that we make very clear, or at least what I want to make sure, is that churches and pastors have a very difficult job, and they've always had to be multifaceted. Why is that? Within our community, we don't have and haven't had and don't have the institutions to provide the support in terms of creating jobs, the support in helping the poor, the support in terms of providing social. When we look, it hasn't been that long ago, Jimmy, how many people were being lynched a day? Black people, black men in particular, were being lynched a day. So the church has been asked to do a lot over the entirety of its existence in a black America that the white church has never really had to deal with. And so their jobs are very hard. So if they are going to, number one, pull more black men into their churches, if they are going to attract more of the future, because, let's be very clear, millennials and Gen Zers, you can say anything about them, but they are the future. If you don't create a ministry or ministries, become global in your scope, know how to connect with them where they are, which is digitally, then you are in trouble within the next 10 to 15 years, because for what it's worth, all of them do have to pay bills. All of them take up collections. And if you are going to, one, spread your ministry and be able to stay alive, you're going to, number one, you're going to have to get more men in the church. And there's a certain type of message that you're going to have for men. You cannot be afraid to lose women in order to attract men.
Right.
And number two, when you look at the psychology of the younger generation, they don't go for that stuff that our parents, or that even we to a certain degree went for. For what it's worth, when our parents told us to do something, we did it because we didn't really have a choice. When something came from the pastor's pulpit, that was literally as Bible as the Bible. But again, we have these things here and we have laptops. And these folks, the younger people, they're very curious and they ask questions.
Right.
And they are not satisfied until they have a very clear, authentic answer that they believe in. And they're not going to go for the same answers that we or our parents or our grandparents went for. The churches have lost their influence because young people, they have access to just as much, if not more, information. They are more technically sophisticated and inclined to have access to more information than their prior generations. This is the first generation, if not the second, where the students, quite frankly, sometimes know more than the teacher because of access to the information and being more technically sophisticated than they were. And so ultimately, the church is going to have to pivot. They are going to have to adapt to what's right in front of them right now. And the black church in particular, that has a special purpose in the black community, if it's going to survive, because it is really the only black institution that still has some degree of financial autonomy. If the black community is going to survive as we know it, the black church is going to have to survive. So this is really a wake-up call.
Well, Tom, I agree with you that it is a wake-up call. and the message does have to change. I mean, we can both agree on that. And the church needs to focus a lot more on teaching the excuse me, I'm going to say the morality of a biblical message, be it the Bible. I mean, I read the Bible, I read the Quran, and I can extrapolate from multiple religious doctrine to sort of the meaning overall of what religion should be about. You know, I mean, if you think about it, Tom, in a higher sense, I mean, God, who I still think is a woman, but we've had that debate. I mean, the whole purpose is this is about creation. You know, we say God created the universe, created the heavens, created the earth, created people, created the woman for man, created the animals for men to be to have dominion over, and the land to work to provide for. Once again, the center of all of this is what? Creation. Bringing people together, man and woman, is for the purpose to procreate or recreate. And so when you look at the gay and lesbian community, which I'm not going to cast and say that their lifestyle is wrong. Right and wrong it comes down to what you believe right and wrong to be, based on what you've been taught and what you believe. And so for people who believe that that lifestyle is wrong, then I understand that. But keep in mind that it's not just any union that doesn't result in creation. You know, single people, according to the Bible, is not in the eyes of God. God would much rather see you married with children and a family and being responsible. So families bear some responsibility to bring young people together and get them married off. But see, we don't speak about that in the church. So, you know, if we're going to get back to a godly message, we need to be able to explain overall what it is, the whole focus of God's message from start to finish, you know, what it's all about, and then, you know, let people kind of, you know, feel their way, how they feel about certain things. Hey, it may just be that if you really think the gay homosexual lifestyle, I'm not going to say gay, just the homosexual lifestyle is a sin and not called for because it doesn't result in procreation or any kind of creation period. Then maybe, you know, that's not to say that that the lifestyle is wrong. It may just not be in sync with Christianity. So that's not to necessarily say that you can cast and make somebody, you know, say they're going to heaven and that they're sinners. It just may be that that lifestyle is not conducive to this teaching, but that doesn't make them any less of a human being or right or wrong. It just means that based on this, but there are other teachings where that lifestyle would be perfectly okay, and so maybe you know maybe that religious philosophy should be what a person should adopt to make what they're doing okay. And I'm not saying go out and kill people. Surely there's no doctrine out there that says that's okay. You know, outside of maybe self-defense, but you know, my point is that young people have natural questions, like you said. They need more explanation. We have to be willing to explain things to them so they can understand why, you know, we take certain positions, why certain things are right or wrong according to this doctrine. Now, if you don't agree with the doctrine, maybe this is not for you. So don't struggle with trying to change the doctrine to accept your lifestyle. That's not the focus here. Don't come in with the political correctness. Don't kind of try to change this. It is what it is. Find something that's for you, that fits your beliefs and your thinking, that you can accept and live with. That's the goal. And then hopefully that doctrine will allow you to develop and grow into a better person without you having to struggle about whether your lifestyle is a sin or not.
Gotcha. And folks, for those who are listening, for those who are out there, we appreciate you being here again. If you haven't, push like, subscribe. But we'd like to hear from you. If there's anyone out there who has a...
Oh, do we announce the phone number?
Absolutely. 972-497-2280. 972-497-2280. For those of you who are out there who have an opinion on the Black church in terms of the direction that it's going, I mean, the numbers are the numbers. It has been declining, but the why part. I mean, do you still go to church, or have you stopped going to church? And if so, why?
Tom,
very curious to know. Yes,
Tom. Neither one of
Yeah,
us is ordained, but
correct.
I'd be willing to bet if you and I were heading up a church, we would not have an
Mhm.
attendance problem because, like you said, we would not tailor messages for women. We wouldn't tailor messages for, well, I would tailor some for men and the family. But you know what? That would be my focus every Sunday until the congregation said, hey, Pastor, it's time to move on to something else. We got this whole family thing. We're good now. But until
Mhm.
then, that would be more my central focus than the letters to Corinth or Ephesians or trying to fill a collection plate. I would let people know that this church is about people and about family and about saving our kids. There's no task more important today for black families than to reach out and save the black children growing up. That needs to be your number one job. And until we get that done, we can't keep losing kids to our street. We can't keep losing families. We can't keep having, young girls, teenage girls, raise our most of our kids. That has to stop, Tom. And you need to have critical mass in the messaging to get that point across. So you and I wouldn't have an attendance problem. I think our churches would be filled up.
Let's certainly hope so. Again, if there's anyone out there who would like to put your thoughts into our discussion of what we're saying, feel free to dial us at 972-497-2280, 972-497-2280, as we continue to carry on the discussion. Jimmy, we have a little bit over 15 minutes left, so
A few minutes.
Until the top of the hour, so we can kind of reel this back in and kind of talk about, what is it that we feel that the black church is going to have to do if it's going to continue to grow and prosper. And one thing I do want to say, I'm not speaking to any specific church, because there are some churches clearly that are growing, that are prospering, that are doing well. There are a lot of churches out there, large and small, that are, I'm pretty sure, targeting these messages. But when we look at larger populations, statistically speaking, in America, this is not just an issue within the black community and the black church. This is an issue with the church in particular. Another thing that we haven't touched on, Jimmy, is if you look at the hypocrisy and the controversy that has been revealed within the church, whether, and we won't call any names, whether we talk about, what's going on, what has happened over the Catholic Church, and the unfortunate incidents that they had within the Catholic Church that was busted wide open, that still we barely have scratched the surface on what really happened there. If we, consider what's going on within the black church in terms of what's being preached by many of these preachers, and unfortunately, a lot of folks have left because they see the pastor profiting in the pulpit while the people are still struggling and are, really aren't getting but a modicum of help. And, men in particular, and I've had this conversation with a lot of guys. One of the things, I can't speak for every guy, but one thing I can say in speaking to a lot of men is that there have been too many instances, Jimmy, where our pastors have disrupted their family environments.
That is true, Tom.
Their family environments, their marriage, take advantage of some of their wives, their children. And, at the end of the day, that pushes men out in droves because, most men, I can't speak for anyone else. Most men I know will not deal with the pimp in the pulpit. And I'm not saying that's even the majority of ministers, but even a few in the wrong churches in a high profile environment creates havoc. A few rotten apples will spoil the barrel in terms of public image and opinion.
Well, Tom, that's why you need strong men. Because, in my household, I mean, I'm not just king here, but I'm a benevolent dictator. I am Lord and Master in my household. That's just the way it goes. I'm not trying to abuse anyone. It just means that I'm responsible for the people in my house, for the wife, that our pets, and for anyone who that we allow into our home. But also, that also means that the spiritual message. You can't advocate that to the pastor. I mean, his job is to deliver a message, but you know what? In your kingdom, You need to be the spiritual head also. That also makes you chief educator. You need to make sure that you're educating your children. The school is just an extension to help you in that process. They're not primarily responsible for educating your kids. So, and the pastor is not primarily responsible for delivering the spiritual message to your family. If you don't go home and correct messaging, things that you don't disagree with, things you agree with and disagree with your family, if you're going to leave it up to some pastor to deliver that.
Wait just a second. We have somebody who just called in.
Oh, okay.
Have an opportunity to speak.
Sure.
Black men speak. How may we help you? Okay, wait a second. I need to make sure. All right, now I think we can hear you. Could you start again, caller? Thank you so much.
Yes.
Can you hear them?
Yes.
All right. Yes, we can hear you. Thank you so much.
I can hear you.
All right.
I was just saying that absolutely you guys are hitting the nails on the head. But it would be interesting to know why did you two fellas stop going to church? I'll share with you because I heard Jimmy say he grew up in the church basically with a bottle in his mouth on the pew, and Tommy as well. I definitely did. I was definitely church girl, big family, and Mom made sure that we were, as Jimmy said, in choir rehearsal on Tuesdays. Wednesdays was Bible study night, and then we go to church on Sunday with 3 services. First of all, Bible study on Sunday. They don't even have that anymore. They took that out of their churches when the mega church came in. And all the other small churches and medium-sized churches started trying to copy that because they were trying to keep up with the mega church. Now, we don't have Bible study in the churches anymore, not that I know of. The second service was the morning worship at 11 a.m. And the third thing was BTU, which was Bible Training Union that happened at 6:30. So we went to church all day and at least a couple of times during the week. So my point is this. So that means we were in church a lot. My point is this. I stopped going because there was a void in a balance of things for me from the church. And like we all do, we see things that we don't like, and, we may stop going. If something may be said, or you see a certain attitude, or you see that there's really no growth, or you don't feel like you can grow there. Secondly, why I stopped going and did not go back and only go occasionally is because when the internet came in and everybody started streaming. So my point was, well, great. I can now go to the internet, select whom I'd like to worship with in my bed, which I call bedside Baptist.
The BBC.
That's right. Watch several sermons from the live stream. So I think you all need to also factor in that live streaming has taken a lot of people out of the church. They now can be at home with their families on Sunday and watch church from the live stream. Again, you guys are doing great. I'm going to yield the floor.
Thank you so much, caller. We appreciate it.
So I'll take a stab at that first, Tom, if you don't mind.
And we want to thank our caller again. I think those were some great points. Go ahead.
Oh, very, very great point. So with me, last church I was really active with for many years, they actually kicked me out of church. The brothers, tried to tell me that they didn't want me to come back. Kicked out of church, man. Because I was quite active. I mean, I gave. I don't believe in paying pastors. Don't come to me negotiating a contract and a retirement fund and 401k contributions. And you have to trust in us like we trust in you. The church had property, they own homes. We offered to take care of you and your family. And this is a part-time pastor because he only preached on Sunday, and then Bible study versus when we had a full-time pastor who was in church every day, who was always there when people needed him. So I'm not going to mention any names or the name of the church. But then on top of that, the messaging. Once again, we have families that are in trouble. We have men that are struggling to understand what their role is. And for me, I hit a crossroad. I had to come to a realization or a point where I asked myself, either the Bible is telling me the truth about what I should do as a husband and a man, or it's lying to me. Either it's going to work, because the end result is that I'm supposed to end up with a wife who's a perfect creation for me, and if I love her correctly and provide for her. So I had to really challenged myself to put that to the test. I'm going to give this a try. I'm going to live my life by what this book says I should do, and I expect the results that it says I'm going to get. And I have, been pleased to say that it does work. So I don't understand why the philosophy and the principles of the Bible are not preached heavily. You talk about saving a soul. Man, you're losing lives right here every day and destroying families. So don't talk to me about my salvation in the afterlife when I'm catching hell in this life. And so, I would make the point, talk to pastor after hours. We would talk outside of church, and, I would say the same thing I'm saying now. The messaging has to change. This just can't be about saving souls and collecting money, man. You've got to get into the family business, saving our wives, saving our husbands. And he was reluctant. He actually told me that his father was a pastor down in Singing Hills down in Oak Cliff. And every time he talked about responsibilities for men and for families, the board would come to him and tell him that's not the kind of message they want to hear. And that if he didn't straighten up, then they would go find a new pastor. So, he was concerned for his job. And it's like, dude, you shouldn't be in this for the money. This.
So let me ask you this, Jimmy. Why would the trustees, why would they tell him not to advocate a message that empowered men, which ultimately...
Because the pro-male message, like you said earlier, alienated women. It made them mad. So... to speak in terms of men being more responsible, stepping up, being leaders of the house. The leader of the household thing would hit home when a lot of women run households. So you're now challenging their authority. And so he didn't want to preach that message. He don't care how many times it's mentioned in the Bible that a man should step up and be ahead. It didn't speak for you to be the follower or to be tailing behind anyone. But, yeah, he wasn't going to preach that message at all. And so they got tired of me complaining about it, the messaging and the pay. Every time we hire a pastor, it's an employment negotiation. It's like, dude, if God truly called for you to do this, then trust that God's going to take care of you when you come do it. You don't need all these negotiations, and I'm not coming to work if I don't get paid, that type of nonsense. But I'm not going to get all into that because I want to make sure I leave enough time for you to comment on your dealing with the black church also.
Jimmy, so I can't say that I was in every church and in every denomination. I grew up in a very conservative, traditional black church growing up. My mother and father divorced when I was very young, and so my mother ended up dating someone who she eventually married after I got out of school and became an adult, and I spent a lot of time in the Catholic Church. When I went to college, I went to probably a little bit more of a non-traditional Baptist church, but for what it's worth, I was going to a church for a couple of years, and I'll leave nameless. And I'll be very transparent with you. I liked the church. He was one of those ministers who kept it very clear. He really focused. He had a very strong men's ministry and did a lot of good things. But the one thing, unfortunately, that just kind of swayed me in a different direction is that he said he wasn't going to really address issues that had any political leanings. And because for me and what I know and what I've studied and everything that I grew up on, the church was always active in issues that impacted the black community, and you can't not deal with political issues and address issues that affect the black community. So I knew I had to make a change. I ended up finding another church that had a very vocal ministry when it came not just to the Bible, but to politics as well. And so for what it's worth, I haven't gone away from the church. I don't go to church as much as I used to when I was a kid, because I made a pact with myself that I was sitting on one of them benches and my knees were hurting. And I said, I am not going to be going to these 3-hour churches. These 3-hour services, and I ain't going to be in church all the time, which I didn't have to every day, but it was enough. So I still support the church. I still give to the church. And quite frankly, my decision is more political, is because I'm giving to a church that I believe advocates the things that are important to me, and they need our support. And so I give them my support, because if the church doesn't do it within the black community, I don't know that there's going to really be too many other groups institutionally who will. That's kind of where I stand. But, getting kind of to the closing statements that we're going to make, if the black church is going to continue to advance, expand, and reorganize, one has to drive a ministry that appeals to the Black men. And what that means is empowerment. What that means is also talking to the sisters in a way that they're probably not going to like, but they have to do it in a very loving way. They cannot continue to say that we're going to be leading the household. We're going to be the lead of the Black family, because quite frankly, we've been doing that for the last generation or two, and it just has not been working out for us at all. So we have a complementary role in raising children, in building families, in building communities. We cannot compete in this country or globally with the Black woman leading everything and the Black man in the side. And to that point, brothers, we have got to go back and take ownership of our roles and responsibilities in our households, our families, our communities, and in this country. This isn't something that sisters should have to wait on us to do. We have to step up as men. We have to take ownership, and we have to take the lead. Number two, stop procreating children that you're not taking care of. If you don't love the woman, you're not going to all of a sudden spend all of your time with a child, with some exceptions. Make sure that you choose a woman that you want to spend the rest of your life with if you are going to procreate children with her. So that, and then obviously, for the youth, that's the next area. They are a completely different breed than any other generation that we've seen since then. They're well informed, they're very well connected, and they're not going to take your word as enough. Number one, you have to have a very clear message that's simple and makes sense. Number two, make sure that you do your research, because hooping and hollering and screaming and speaking tongues and hopping around ain't gonna get it with these young people. They need to know what you're talking about and why. And this generation also is more socially and politically active, probably, than the prior generation. And so you have to be active in the community and doing the things that resonate with them if you're going to connect with them and bring them to your church. And obviously, you have to bring in young people to help with the technology side of it.
Right.
And making sure that you connect with where they are, because they are all connected. And if you aren't, you're going to miss it.
That is true, Tom. That is true. Now let me ask you the question, Tom. Can anyone really explain what speaking in tongue really is and translate it for someone? That's just a joke. But yeah, Tom, I agree with your points, and they are solid and right on. And there are ways you can bring young people into the church, but you have to have something that resonates with them, and you need to have a message that's centered around the real message from God, and not pick and choose the message. I mean, the message itself is in its entirety should be what you preach, and make sure your congregation understands, not just parts of it that benefits you. With that being said, Tom, we also, like you pointed out, we can't be afraid to speak to the roles and responsibilities, not just from the roles of men and women, but even collectively for families. We as a community and a people, we have some huge disappointments, and we have a rule that we don't air our dirty laundry out, but sometimes we have to, because discussing our problems is going to be the only way we can get to a solution and start maybe get enough critical mass to do something about it. So we have problems. Go ahead.
And Jimmy, this is the other thing that I just thought of. Man, our churches have to reinforce that our parents have to be parents. They cannot
stop being friends with your kids.
Stop being friends with your children. Teach these mothers, because quite frankly, fathers usually aren't in the picture. Unfortunately, it's just the way it is right now. If you're going to address your ministry predominantly to women, and Black men are not going to be there, you better darn well teach your mothers how to teach their boy children and their women children, and you better find some male support for your boys and for your girls, because this raising your son without a man, without the father primarily, it isn't working out for us.
It's not, Tom. That is absolutely true. It's not. And next show, since we're going to coming to the end here, we're going to talk about it a little bit more. About the downfall of absentee fatherhood, and what men can do to start helping out a little bit more. There are a lot of single mothers out there who could use some help. And ladies, you have to be open for men who want to help. That doesn't mean that you just let any man walk through the door. But when there is a man, an uncle, a brother, or a good friend of yours who wants to help out, is willing to help out, you have to open that door and allow it to happen for the sake of your sons. So
but be very careful, because if you got boys and girls, you better be very careful as to who you let in that door.
Tom, you got to be careful if it's boys and men these days.
Well, this is true.
So yeah, you have to be careful. Period, when you're dealing with your children. But you have to be willing to vet people, and if you vet and think they're okay after you vetted them, then allow them into your child's life with some supervision and some oversight. But your young boys could benefit from having that man around. Even just go ahead.
And listen to your children when it comes to
definitely. Yes. Talk to them. That let them know that you don't have to be anything to be ashamed of. But I need to know everything that's happening. So just in case. So, but anyway, Tom, as our unordained minister, you can go ahead and close it out with a prayer.
All right, everybody bow your heads. Dear Lord and gracious Father, we come before you again, thanking you for blessing us to see another day. We thank you for our health. We thank you for our strength. We thank you for our faculties. We thank you for bringing us together as a family. Understanding, Father, you are the Lord of all creation. You are the Lord of everything that we live. We thank you for every opportunity, every breath we take. We ask, Father, that you continue to bring us together. We can ask that you continue to bring our families together. We ask that you continue to protect and provide for us every day. We know that every opportunity is out there for us, Father, and with you by our side, there is nothing that we cannot do. Continue, Father, to bless this show, where we're going, so that we can minister to those people out there who do need to hear a word, and they do need to hear it from Black men. We thank you and we praise you in your precious name. Amen.
Amen. Tom, we may have to start an online church, man, that only accepts Bitcoins. We ordain ourselves as a bedside church, the BSC, that only takes Bitcoins.
Jimmy, I think that we would have an overwhelming response to the young community out there, man. We would probably have more young folks than anything else.
Probably so. All right, guys, we're out. See